God, can you imagine that? Like, you're named after that guy. You get up to that level. Like, what are even the odds of that? If you're named after him to even be a ball player, like, how much does that impact your decision to be a ball player?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Do you
you were
think as
kind
a
of,
kid that it does that?
yeah, it's like a premonition. You were told earlier
Do you feel like
on.
you have to live up to it?
Yeah, I don't know if you have to live up to it, but if you make it to the major leagues, that's an accomplishment in and of itself.
Yes.
Like you were born to do that.
It's crazy how much we're out of touch with when we're like, how did he not catch that? Or how did he not hit that? Like, what skill level and what, like, level and echelon that athlete is at, like, compared to, like, what you're at.
Well, you see it more recently just because there are just slews of great athletes that have kids now, like the Vlad Guerrero Juniors and all the NBA players where their kids are showing up to play, is the Steph Curry with Del Curry, the Michael Thompson and Klay Thompson. You see that. So those almost make sense because you were just born into that.
Yeah.
But if you're some kid who has a dad that's an insurance adjuster and a mom that's...
That was how it was, I think, more so like in the 90s.
Yeah, you had these guys that were coming up that didn't have...
They were the first generation where sports professionally was almost an option.
Yeah, where the big money contracts came from. Because, like, looking back at our OJ podcast, he didn't make that much money.
No,
it was...
But he was kind of the entry level to that, so they found out that now you're having... The kids coming up now, or even another generation behind, are the children who grew up seeing that that was an option.
Yep.
That was something they could do for a profession, so you've just gotten better. And now all those kids that didn't grow up like that but looked at that as the echelon, now they're trying to become professional athletes.
They're competing with all those athletes.
The 90s
children.
was fucking crazy, man, which is like, well, I'm glad we're doing this 1v1.
That was a great lead-in.
Was it?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
So this is our
Hell
1v1 on 90s shit. So, Adam, break it down on what we're covering as far as categories for 90s.
90s was such a big just era and decade that we're going a little bit more with the options this time.
I do want to also put a disclaimer on this that we're not just like going back and like talking about shit we like read about in the 90s. Like, we're legitimate like 90s kids.
Yes. Yeah. 90s were time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to do trend. We're going to do album, athlete, toy, TV show, and TV theme song. Those things that when you got home from school at like 3:30 and you turn on the TV, you just automatically expect to hear that theme
Did you
song.
watch TV in the morning getting ready? Eating breakfast or anything?
I was a late sleeper, so
Okay.
I didn't catch a lot in the morning. But yeah, after school, usually you had like 45 minutes between school and practice, or if mom and dad were getting home at 5 and you had to go to practice after that, you had a little bit of time to get your snack in. Homework didn't matter back in the 90s.
No.
I don't remember doing a lot of 90s homework.
All right, so let's start with trend. What do you think is the best trend from the 90s?
My best trend, and I don't know if this is personal, I'm sure that it had to have had a little bit of a glow up everywhere. My 90s trend was bleached hair. I think I first bleached my hair in like fifth grade.
Like not well bleached. Like, this was just
orangey, yellowy tint. You probably did it with peroxide at home.
Yep.
If you had a mom that did hair like I did, she actually went and got like more of the stuff that they use in a salon. But everybody, I don't know if it was Eminem.
Did you ever bleach your fro?
No. I never did any natural.
Adam actually had an afro. Like, you wouldn't think of it like looking at your hair when it's shorter, but I guess is that the point?
Yeah, it's just so much easier to control. Once it gets to about 1.5 inches long, the curls start to come.
I was going to say, it had so much body.
Just the worst cultural appropriation ever.
All right.
It always seemed like it showed up. I mean, I don't know if it was real Slim Shady. I don't know if it was Eminem doing it, but everybody either had bleached tips. You remember that stupid duck's ass that everybody used to do where they would gel it up and then stick it up in the front? You would always have that front.
Oh, yeah.
tips.
So, like, instead of, like, yes, you would, like, it almost looked like you put your hand together and then brought it up. Yeah.
And that tip was always bleach blonde on kids, even if there was no other hair that was
It was
bleach
popular,
blonde.
man. You had Eminem doing it, and then you had you had a member of, like, each of the major boy bands with bleach tips.
Did you?
Yeah, you had, I think, Lance Bass from NSYNC. Backstreet Boys would have been who would have had hair that was.
I'm no.
I know. I'm trying to think. But yeah, I can think each one, and then I'm sure it was one of in 98 Degrees, Nick Lachey, him and his brother, both of them probably had bleach tips. But I think it was a staple.
Time.
There was in boy bands, there was always a mold. I think that somebody had to fit. All right. Mine was hair related too. It was the middle part or bowl cut. So like I'm talking the middle cut. If you remember, like Primetime Home Improvement, not Zachary Taylor. Is it Zachary Taylor Thomas? Jonathan Taylor Thomas. JTT. That kind, or the full on bowl cut, but you would still have the part right down the middle. As a former rocker of the bowl cut for many, many years.
Really?
It was so easy because all you do is take the comb that side, and everything. The middle cut was the middle part. Oh my God.
Yeah, back in the 90s, a part wasn't just in a woman's hair. Men had many parts. Yep. Wow.
Right. Let's do best album.
Okay. My best album, I don't know. I'm sure I listened to it in the 90s, but probably just more after and still to this day. But Sublime studio album, just Sublime. You got Santeria on it, What I Got, all those songs that you could just put the CD in and play it back to back to back, and everything was just so solid on the whole entire thing. It wasn't Bad Fish. Bad Fish was on another one. But there's just literally everything. A Pawn Shop, all sorts of just good music. And it's a summer anthem still, I think. It's just so good. And unfortunately, things didn't go real great for Sublime afterwards, because I think it was like a few months either before or after Brad Norwell, the lead singer, OD'd and died. So if it was before, I think they probably knew that they had to get a new lead singer and it wasn't going to sound the same. But that album was just so solid.
All right. I am going to go with... Okay, so I'm going to do one that I realize is probably the best 90s album later in life, and that was the Dazed and Confused soundtrack. I know it's cheating sometimes to go with soundtracks, but I think the Dazed and Confused soundtrack is so good. But it also is not technically 90s music. It's music from like the 70s when it was supposed to be. But
that movie's the biggest mindfuck ever.
Really?
It feels like you are watching a movie from the 70s.
Okay. Yes, it really does. The way that everything is done in it, I agree. If I'm going with my album from the 90s, it's another soundtrack. It's the soundtrack to Armageddon.
I'm unfamiliar with that.
Okay, so you're familiar with the major song from Armageddon, the Aerosmith Don't Want to Miss a Thing?
Yeah.
Okay. This also had Journey on it.
Okay.
It had some additional Aerosmith, and I love Aerosmith. Has ZZ Top, Bob Seger, Bon Jovi. Not always the best songs of these artists, but Our Lady Peace. It was just a solid... I loved the movie, and so maybe I associate with that, but Don't Want to Miss a Thing was a banger at high school dances for the longest time. Yep.
You can get close with your sweetie.
Mm-hmm. So that's going to go with... And I know, listen, that's no disrespect to other... That's, Doggy Style came out, Pearl Jam 10 came out, The Chronic came out. I'm just saying what I listened to.
Yeah, The Chronic is my honorable mention. I still listen to The Chronic to this day.
Yes, if I'm going back and saying what the best ones were, that definitely makes the list. But at the time in the 90s, that's what I was listening to. Yeah. All right, let's go to... See, I feel like Best Athlete.
Best Athlete, there's just a 1-1.
See, I stayed away from, I think, probably like the three biggest ones.
Yeah. Michael Jordan.
That was the number one that pulled up in. That goes without saying. We don't even need to discuss that.
Yeah.
Who would you say for number two?
My number two's got to be Barry Sanders for me.
Yeah.
And those two are obviously right there. One that I wanted to sneak in, but I didn't feel right was Bo Jackson. Because for me, Bo Jackson's probably my favorite athlete of all time.
Yes.
But he just did not. He had his hip injury, and I think it was 91.
Yeah.
So
I went with someone whose major accomplishments, the bulk of their career happened in the 90s and their fame. So who did you pick as yours that you wanted to use your selection?
Dennis Rodman.
That's it.
Is that who you were going with?
Nope. But I looked at Dennis. Mine's actually kind of in the same vein, actually. I went with that because I went with someone who, when you look at them, just put in prime and then put this person's name. It will be their picture from the 90s, and it'll be all of the stuff that they did in the 90s when they were at their peak.
Yeah.
Okay, so go a little bit in on Rodman.
Rodman was the king of weird, the king of like fun, and obviously as a kid, as a kid in the 90s, I didn't know all the bad that came with all the good and all the excitement and all the depression and all just the shit that he went through in his life. But a guy that was an undersized 4, he was only like 6'7", maybe 6'8", and could bang down with Sean Bradley whenever he wanted to. He was going against David Robinson, all those dudes that were just bigger, stronger, and tougher than him that were going to be able to box him out and grab rebounds. And the fun thing about Rodman is he was a generational basketball player that I don't think we've ever really seen since. But what he did outside of the arena of basketball was just...
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, there's no words.
It's a guy whose exploits outside of what he was the professional at are what he's better known for. He was that good at basketball. That's why he's not as well known for his basketball skills, is because his exploits outside of basketball were even better than that.
Oh, yeah.
That would be like saying if Michael Jordan was also a better golfer than he is a basketball player. And then Michael Jordan became known as Bo Jackson. How many people do you think know Bo Jackson played baseball? He was a better football player than he was a baseball player.
Yeah.
So he's known for being better at that. Like, Dennis Rodman fucking was crazy. Someone that like was at that level, but also had this complete other life that wasn't even related to basketball.
The guy got married in a fucking wedding dress to Carmen Electra, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the king of scraping hot chicks from MTV in the 90s. From that, I think
he was basketball Pete Davidson.
Yeah, Jenny. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he got in with Jenny McCarthy for a while, and then Carmen Electra. Him and Carson Daly on Say What Karaoke must have had some sort of a bond or something like that, because every time one of those girls worked for him, D-Rod was dating him.
Well, and that's the thing, too. He kind of had that, like imagine if, like, Prince was dangerous, that, like, androgynous thing. So he was, like, this androgynous bad boy that was not a lot of, there weren't a lot of people like that. I mean, nowadays you get people, like, that are more akin to that or kind of more just, like, openly out, but he was just like, I don't give a fuck.
Guy was getting his hair done before every single game. There were two things that you tuned in to see during a Bulls game in the 90s, and it was what Jordan was going to do and what hair color Rodman had that night.
I love when he had the patchwork.
The cheetah was hot. I had, in like second grade, we were supposed to do like a report on like heroes and like favorite people, and there were like pilots and Amelia Earhart and all that shit. I pulled a whole section out of Sports Illustrated and put it on a big board of Dennis Rodman with that cheetah hair. And my dad was so pissed. He's like, he is not a good person. I was like, Dad, he's a good basketball player, though. Like, can I just do it on that? He's like, no, you can't.
He's an inspiration for me playing basketball. He just happens to look like this.
Yeah, just the craziest dude. And granted, later on in life, things did get very weird. Somehow him and Kim Jong-un are like buddies. And he goes over and does that stuff in North Korea, which is very odd. But
and again, not that known for that.
No?
That's how much the other stuff like offsets it. It's crazy.
Yeah. He's my athlete.
All right. Kind of like you, I wanted someone that you just looked at and you're like 90s. I went with Andre Agassi.
Yeah. Yep. The hair or lack thereof.
Which, did you know that was a wig?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought I knew that, but then like I read it and I was like, oh shit, I didn't know that. I was like, of course it is. If anyone is okay, so pull out your phone right now if you're listening to this. Pause it if you have to. Go look at Andre Agassi. Just put Andre Agassi 90s. And you're going to ask yourself, first of all, you're going to be impressed. Secondly, ask yourself this. Out of the selection of wigs that you could pick to try to pass off for not only this, man, you're playing tennis in this. And you're also going to have to wear this out and about in your daily life. You don't just pick something like easy to keep or anything like that. No. This is like a full-on like lion's mane.
You go wild.
Yes. And he's got the headband. It's like the epitome of 90s tennis if you're looking at it. Did you know he lost a match once in what might have been the French Open final because his wig started to come off and he had to he was trying to keep it on and he wasn't able to stretch to balls and stuff like that because of the movement.
Because he didn't want to lose the wig. He had this thing. I'll get into his career in a second, but he had this thing where it was looks above all else. He had this and he got over that later in his career after he shaved his head and everything. Uh-huh. But it was like looks matter the most, or your appearance matters the most. But one of the things about him was, so he was born in Vegas. Just his upbringing is kind of crazy. Like he ended up not even graduating high school. He turned pro at I want to say 18. He was sent at 13 to this famous guy's tennis camp. His dad wrote him a check to pay for it. I was going to say he got there, and after watching him for 30 minutes, the guy that ran the camp was like, take your check back. He's here for free. And he dropped out of school. Ninth grade. Dropped out of school in the ninth grade to pursue tennis. He became a professional at, I think, 16. He competed in his first match. What a wildly, unrich person. Tennis is probably more of a rich person sport. It's a fancier.
You don't think of that anymore because the Williams sisters, and you see how they in the street,
but
on the
it's
streets
played
of New
at
York.
country clubs. One of my favorite Andre Agassi stories is he when he played, he was sponsored by Nike. And
was it Nike?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he had a Nike tennis shoe called the Nike Tech Challenge 2s, and he did the Nike Tech Challenges that weren't as great. But when he had the Tech Challenge 2s at Wimbledon, when you play at Wimbledon,
they had to be white.
Yeah, you have to be all white.
Yes.
He was one of the first competitors to have those Nike Tech Challenges and had a colored swoosh on it, and ended up getting fined because he had the swoosh color on there.
Yes, they don't fuck around. Wimbledon.
Serena got it. One of the recent guys, Kyrgios or whatever his name is, seems like not a great guy, but kind of a fun bad boy. He was wearing dunks out there pregame. They
do not fuck around with that. The British don't fuck around about traditional stuff like that. So Wimbledon, everything has to be, not even off-white. Can't have anything you have to be wearing white, and I think your logos have to be black or maybe navy blue. You might be able to get away with. But a lot of these guys that are sponsored for the clothing manufacturers, I'm sure they make some stuff, but a lot of them have to have custom-made strictly white stuff to be able to play in.
Specifically for Wimbledon.
But Agassi actually didn't play at Wimbledon for the first 3 years he was available to. 2 or 3 years he was I'm not playing it because I don't like your guys' traditional things that I can't wear it.
But he was that good that it didn't matter. He came back and he ended up winning Wimbledon a couple times, didn't he?
Yeah. So I mean he had a pretty good career. I mean, I think nowadays in tennis, and I don't know how many people are fans of tennis out there, but I enjoy it. Over the last probably decade, maybe decade and a half, fans have been kind of used to these certain players just completely being dominant. For the longest time, I grew up with Roger Federer, and he just dominated. And then you had his rivalry with Rafael Nadal, and then now this Djokovic guy, and there's been a few other people. But you get these stretches where you have these just dominant men's players, and it also depends on the surface. But Agassi played at the same time as Pete Sampras, so theirs was a big rivalry. So if one of them wasn't winning, it was the other one, and kind of vice versa.
They were so big back in the day that probably one of the more famous Bay Area rappers, Mac Dre, he had a song where his lead-in was Andre Mackesy and Street Sampras.
Oh, really?
They crossed over into hip-hop and rap culture to get name drops on major rapper songs.
See, the other thing that's kind of cool about Agassi is he, I think in 97... he actually had confessed that he was using crystal meth.
He looks like it, though.
Well, with the hair, if you're looking at the hair, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But considering that the hair wasn't even real, you kind of wonder about that. But what ended up happening is he went all the way down. So he was a former number one player
Yeah.
before. He dropped all the way down to number 141. And they were just like, okay, well, he's done. He's out of it. So in like 98, he starts training again. And then he ends up coming back in like 98 and makes in 98 goes from 110 to number 6 in the world. And I think he ends up winning a major that year. And they said, and that was the start of the better part of his career. So, I mean, comeback kid, man. Ditched
Funny.
that. He
Had to
ditched
kick
that
drugs.
crystal. Ditched the crystal. He ditched the wig. Have you seen, what's the name of it? It's a mockumentary. It's on HBO. It's called 7 Days in Hell. Okay, you need to watch this tonight. I'm not even kidding. Like, I'll start watching The Orville or whatever anything you want me to watch. You watch this tonight. So it's on HBO, and it's a mockumentary, and it actually takes a lot of Pete Sampras's. So like Andy Samberg plays like this Pete Sampras character, but he's the white kid that was adopted by Richard Williams and trained with Serena and Venus.
No way.
Yes, so he's the male tennis player, but he's got like the Andre Agassi hair, and he's like the bad boy of tennis and everything. And then the guy that plays from Game of Thrones, Kit Harington, that played Jon Snow, he plays like this British tennis player, like this up and coming new hope for the British, who's like this completely tennis obsessed guy. Like his mom was like overbearing and didn't let him go to even like real school, and all he knows how to do is play tennis. So he's like super socially awkward, and he has all this staged. And it's about this match they had at Wimbledon where it lasted for 7 days because no one could get a break point, and all this crazy shit happens during the match. You need to watch it. It's hilarious. It's got Will Forte as like one of the announcers. It's got a whole bunch of like well-known
It's
like actors
is
playing
it
like
the
the
Lonely
parents.
Island guys or whatever?
Yes, it's kind of. But it's hilarious. And it's not that long. It's like an hour long.
That ain't bad.
I recommend it. Everyone stop what you're doing. Go watch that. It's hilarious.
Except for listening to this. Don't stop listening to this.
Yes, wait till we're done.
Okay, so what do you got for best toy?
I'm going to go with N64.
Yeah, I tried to avoid video games just because it's such an easy one, but the N64 is...
Well, let's not say it's easy. It's not the... Okay, here's the thing I'm talking about. Is best toy on this one is... This was like the centerpiece of your fucking like sleepovers.
Yeah, this
Like-
this to me felt like a branch of the electronics field where the diversion was you were either an N64 person and a Nintendo person before Xbox, or you were PS1. Because it was kind of, they didn't come out close to each other, but it was one of those things where it was either N64 or you waited to get a regular original PlayStation.
See, I think the N64, the way it changed the game and why it's my number one for 90s toys, is that it allowed you, it was a fucking sleepover game changer. It allowed you to go from having a sleepover with just one buddy, because like you could have sleepovers with multiple friends, but the logistics, if you just had the one gaming system where two of you were playing, then taking turns and swapping out, all of a sudden now you got 4 controllers, you got GoldenEye, you got Mario Kart.
A lot of sleepovers revolved
A lot of
GoldenEye.
friendships were tested.
Yes.
Some were broken. The weak ones, you got to find out who your friends were playing Mario Kart. You got to find out who that motherfucker was using those bananas. You found out about a lot of people's characters.
GoldenEye, you were introduced to a whole nother world of like. I know that there were first-person shooters before that, like there was Doom and all that stuff. I think
This was the first one that was like against each other, wasn't it?
yeah, and it was like you had the 4 split screens. You could run 4 controllers off of it.
It was where Screen Peeking first was
Yes.
born, and then you
Yep.
had those like you always knew who that asshole friend was because they picked Odd Job because he was shorter.
Yeah.
So where your gun automatically sat line of sight was like over Odd Job's head if you were like close enough or like something. And so you had that asshole fucking using Odd Job, where to the point where you just had to say, "Hey, no one gets Odd Job."
Yeah,
we shouldn't have to say this, but we have to tell that one guy.
It was when it was a story before it became like a campaign in the one person mode. Because I can remember you had to save Natasha out of the
It was
jail
exactly
cell.
the movie. It was
Yes.
the exact GoldenEye movie. It was
And
so
Pierce
good.
Brosnan wasn't even a good. He was okay. He was an
Yeah.
okay James Bond, but it was just that game just reinforced GoldenEye. GoldenEye wasn't even a fantastic.
The game was more popular than the movie.
Absolutely,
Yes, because the
down.
game still gets played. They're like remastering it or something.
It had what was it? It was WCW NWO Revenge, and it was they did so many WCW games for the N64 because it was just the golden time during the Monday Night Wars between WWF and
Do you remember
WCW.
this? You remember this music? Who's able to play it?
Yeah.
What other game had pause music that was
Just
a banger?
hot
Like
in the
wait till the xylophone kicks in.
Yeah.
Like how you put that much into your pause music?
It does even though I was a PlayStation guy, it transports me back to
You slept over at least at someone's house
Yeah.
that had you knew how to play N64 even though you didn't have one.
so not to go into a dark story, but a friend that I had in second grade, him and I grew up together, just best friends all the time. And I had the PlayStation and I did the PlayStation game. So when we'd sleep over at my house, it was always PlayStation. He's unfortunately not alive anymore, but we would spend nights over at his house on his bunk beds. And we made sure that we could pull the N64 close enough to where I could sit up on the top and he could sit on the bottom. And we would play that shit all night long. And we would go to Hastings because that was back when that was the thing where you used to have to rent video games. And we would rent something that he wanted, and I would always go wrestling. But we would always end up playing them all night long. And it was the time of Surge, when Surge was a real thing.
Was Jolt Cola still? Yeah, that was right with Surge. Yeah,
It was
that was if you wanted there were two camps. Jolt was for the cola people. If you like Coke and everything, Surge was for that Mountain Dew. If you needed your Mountain Dew to have like 2 or 3 times the amount of caffeine it should have had.
6 to 10, ages 6 to 10, Surge was cocaine back then. You could jump on the tramp all day long. It was what you drank to stay awake. And
Was that the first energy drink? What you would consider, or was it because like that's
Yeah, it could have been. I mean, it was the first thing where they're just like, hey, how do we make Mountain Dew better?
what
More
a time!
caffeine.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah, that was for not having an N64, but always have one in the field of playing and friends. It was just so key in every single sleepover, like you said.
All right, what do you got?
I went with the Vortex because the Vortex was, to me, the epitome of recess in elementary school. And I don't know if I just hit at the right time, but elementary school in the 90s, you would go out and you would play 500 or you would play football out in the field. You would pick your teams and it would be the game that you would play at the first recess. I think we had 3. We had first, we had lunch, and then we had afternoon because I'm sure they knew that we could only handle so much learning. But you would pick your teams first recess, you would play first recess, then you would play the extra long lunch, and then you would play third recess. And whether it was 500 and you were out there hucking that thing a mile, I don't know what the science is behind putting a tail on a football, but you felt like you could throw that thing. You could Uncle Rico. You could throw it over the mountains.
It stretched the field. So I think the progression when, normal football, then Nerf, that soft spiraled one and everything that you could just snag with one hand, or if you were bored, you just pick the foam fucking right out of it.
Yep.
Once it got wet, it was ruined because the core would never get rid of the moisture in it because it was just a giant sponge.
It would just suck everything up.
And then they put a fin on the back and made the football smaller. And it was just like, God, you had to make the football field like 30 or 40 yards longer. You could add more, and you got to add more friends in and everything. But like every play was go deep.
You hear the whistle, the whistle that they put on it later.
I'll tell you right now, I have a whistling Vortex football at home. I use it for throwing it for Charlie.
Yeah.
And the reason behind it is simple. I don't got to put much effort into that thing.
No?
And like this thing is pretty, the fins are all bent. The nose has been chewed up and everything, but it's still got the whistles. But I can sit there and I can put like 50% throw into it, and the thing is going almost like 40 or 50 yards. It's the perfect dog toy. They should just market that as a dog toy now. Make them a little firmer.
You remember the excitement when you caught a pass, but it slipped through your hands and you just caught it by the tail
The fin. You pinched your hands
Yes.
just fast enough to catch that.
There's no better feeling than knowing that you missed it, but you still caught it. It's still in your hands. Oh, dude, it was just, it was nirvana as
Or
a
those
kid.
tips. It would get tipped up in the air, and you would just be, and you grab it by the fin, take off running.
You say 500 dead or alive, and you just reach back and throw that thing as high and as far as you can, and everybody just immediately falls back as far as. Oh,
You've
dude,
gotten tired of throwing it by yourself, and you're just like, these assholes can't catch anything. Jackpot.
Yep.
Dead or alive.
Yes.
Somebody get me out of this position. Let me get back in the group.
Let me get back into the scrum and start throwing elbows to try to catch again.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, dude, that was elementary school for me growing up.
It's still useful. I still enjoy
it's
it
still
today.
being used today.
What did you have for an honorable mention?
My honorable mention was sock and boppers, because sock and boppers to me was like the invention of the first time where you could actually use like boxing gloves, but safer yet more dangerous as a kid.
Do your children love beating the shit out of each other? Are you tired of explaining all of the bruises at the store? Sock and boppers.
Do you know what CTE is? Because if you don't know what CTE is, these are the best gift that you could have.
Do you ever think that sock and boppers introduced the act or sport of casual living room betting on children fighting? Like if you were like at a barbecue and the kids are out there, like bust out the sock and boppers, put them on the kids. It's harmless.
Yeah.
They're not going to hurt each other.
My kid has been swinging on me left and right. I think my kid's tougher than your kid.
Yeah.
You got sock and boppers. You got the blue ones. I got the red ones. Let's
After
get this
drinking,
shit
trying to
on.
figure out if your adult hand will fit into the sock and bopper. After the child fighting wasn't entertainment enough.
Yeah, not to mention that was, you would always see, it would always be a movie on, not to tip picks for the next couple, but you'd always see it on America's Funniest Home Videos. There was always some kid that was either getting decked or some dad that wasn't paying attention that took one right in the junk, which all it did was just make the surface area bigger when you got hit in the dick. It was just so phenomenal.
Do you remember the Tiger Electronics games?
They had the old Street Fighter.
Yes, they were like maybe like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 inches by like 6 or 7 inches.
And it was just a little screen.
Black and white screen, and it was all linear, and it was almost predetermined positions for the guys. Like but they did have like.
It was pre-Game Boy.
So they did have like Street Fighter, and they had like Metroid, and I think they might have had like Sonic the Hedgehog. But those things, man, on a road trip, if you're just like sitting there, can you imagine what a parent looking back and be like, that thing, it's a freaking like a 1.5 inch, 2 inch screen, and the guy just moves up and down and side to side, and that's all he does.
You could do 3 moves, 4 moves with them at most. That, thinking back on it, that just triggered being young and going to my grandparents' house. They would always have the old like 21 like poker and blackjack ones like that, where it was just a little handheld.
Yeah.
I swear to God, that's where I learned how to do math. And
I never even thought about that, but that makes so much sense that they would make adult versions of those. But
Yeah.
as a kid, having like just blackjack or poker or roulette or
solitaire,
anything like that, that would make perfect sense.
it just happens so much. And in going into this topic and really researching and pulling it up, I almost ended up with a white Power Ranger dagger.
The white tiger sword.
And like we were
I believe his
talking
name
about-
is Saba.
So yeah, it could have been.
And he talked.
Yeah. It talked at the end. It had the white blade at the beginning. That almost led me into buying that. I almost bought the green one from the Green Power Ranger, the original one, the little
flute
dagger.
dagger?
It was
To summon the dragon sword. Yeah.
yeah. You remember these things from being a
How
kid.
did he play that without his mouth? The mouth was just metal, and he would
was
hold
magic.
that thing up, and he would play the. Yeah.
Yeah, his lips were pursed on his
Yes.
mask to be able to do it. Just so many things as a kid where you see it again, you're like, yeah, that shit. We used to go into the store. I even remember, I think it was the green one was the first time, like one of the first memories of being a kid that I remember, like being an embarrassment in a store. I can remember throwing a fit for not giving it and like trying to slip it into a cart. My mom being like, nah, bro, this isn't happening today. And I threw the biggest fit. And I just remember that look from my mom, like, you little son of a bitch. We're in public and you're pulling this shit right now on me. You didn't do enough good things at home to deserve this. We're going to leave right now. And it just so formative in my years. I remember so much of that stuff.
God, I remember wanting the morphin thing.
The Megazord?
No, just the morphin thing that attached to your belt, and it had the coins in it, and that they flipped out. It's
They
morphin
had the
time.
little
Yeah.
coins in front for the dinosaurs.
And then even like as a teenager and like growing up like in my early 20s, they started making those into belt buckles, like nostalgia belt buckles that they sold like at Spencer's and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. At that point, I was old enough that I was like, I can't do this.
There's
I can
this-
come back to it now at this age,
Yeah.
maybe, but
In your 20s, it's weird. In your 30s, it's like, yeah,
it's
dude,
fashion.
that's-
It's fashion. It's current fashion forward when you're in your early 20s because you're just out there in the wild trying to score some prey. And no one's you're not going to snag what you're wanting to snag with the Power Rangers belt buckle.
A guy with a Power Rangers belt buckle isn't getting ass out of the club. It's just not. It's never.
He should be,
happen.
God damn it, but he's not.
Yeah, you got to respect that. And I don't know how it is these days. Like, there was a generation that was just missed on me, like Yu-Gi-Oh and all that shit, where I don't get it. I'm sure there's a subset that still are into that stuff, like Pokemon and all that. I get it. I understand. I don't understand because I liked it. I understand because I had things like the Power Rangers that made me understand how much it was to like that.
Yes. All right. What do you got for best TV show?
Just leading into it, just as simple as that, it was Power Rangers. It was not necessarily watching the show was great. I remember being a Power Rangers fan club member and getting all the headshots sent to me, and my parents being nice enough to frame them and put them on my walls. I remember having the Power Rangers bed set, the bed sheet set. This was back in the time when, unfortunately, things got a little bit weird, but I had a Brett Favre light strike, like over the light switch.
Okay, yeah.
A light plate, and it was right near his wiener was, which also got weird being that. But it was either my Brett Favre bed sheet or it was my Power Rangers bed sheet. You wanted all the toys. You wanted the Red Ranger, Blue Ranger, the Green Ranger eventually when he got let in, yellow and pink being the girls. That was kind of like your first crush. I remember Kimmy being the pink one. She was very hot. Asian persuasion coming in. You're seeing a yellow
If
Power
you wanted
Ranger.
to be mentally stimulated, Trini was that was your lane.
Yeah, she was great. She was absolutely great. It was just so much fun back then. And that was almost like, yeah, I'm going to say it. I didn't want to say it. I'm going to say it. For us, that was almost like my first incantation of the token black friend.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't Zach.
It was Zach.
It wasn't Zach?
Yeah, it was Zach, Billy, Jason, Trini, and Kim. And Jason was the Green Ranger. No. Tommy.
Tommy was Green Ranger.
Tommy was Green Ranger.
Because he ended up being a UFC fighter after that and trying to do mixed martial arts and all that goofy shit.
I think he was actually pretty good at it.
Yeah. But
I think now he just kind of more leans into the Green Ranger thing because they've had him back for like, they've been making Power Rangers this whole time. They've had him back for like several seasons of different iterations. He's basically like the Iron Man of the Power Rangers. Okay. So he can drop into different ones and everyone's just so fucking excited that it's him.
But unfortunately, growing up where we were, you did have kind of the one black friend intermingled in there, and you saw that in the Power Rangers.
Was there? Yeah, there was like, I'm trying to think back because, Angel Grove that they lived in, Zach was the only person that got real screen time. So like the people that only got real screen time were the Power Rangers, Bulk and Skull, the two like bumbling fucking bullies. And then like Rita and whoever. So I think Zach, and I'm sure you saw other people in the background, but yeah, they had representation, but man, they were really, I think they've done much better in the future.
Better, yes.
But I think that was an introduction for some people.
Yeah. And it was for me. And so much into thinking about the movies that they did and Lord Zed and Bulk and Skull being taken aboard the ship outside and running into, what was the witch lady's name?
Rita.
She was the witch?
Rita, yeah.
Yeah, hearing her laugh and seeing Bulk and Skull like meet them and be
last, like, it's mine or whatever. Yeah.
Always so good. And even the movies were enough. They weren't good movies, and I'm sure going back and looking at them now, the production quality is
tried to
awful.
Watch them recently, and it was just that it wasn't compelling enough to have me continue to watch it. But it's almost kind of fun to. I remember the two movies that I remembered were the one that had the Ivan News guy, the purple guy, and that took over all the parents and everything. And that was when and their like costumes got like super cool armor upgrades and all that
It was
shit.
rubber. Yep.
And then there was one that was Power Rangers Turbo, and that was like the last time I like watched it.
It
and
was
that
like the ninjas in the forest.
they had they got like vehicles, but that turned into dinosaurs or something like that. I can't remember, but that was like the new group where it was like a different Red Ranger, and I think the only one left at that point was Tommy, and he was the White Ranger, and he was like the new leader.
And you just whenever you're
It was like them doing Saved by the Bell, the new class, so it only kept you interested for a little bit, and then you're just kind of like, okay, it's not the same Power Rangers I know.
For me, it was a transformative time. Like you went from Power Rangers into Saved by the Bell, kind of same high school dynamic, but they just didn't have superpowers.
It was so weird, man. Like, I'll jump into my show in a second, but the amount of stuff that like I as myself, that doesn't make sense. That statement doesn't make sense, but that I watched in the 90s, just the like scope of the genre was so crazy. Like pre crazy ass fucking Kevin Sorbo, I watched Hercules and Xena, and
Xena
I think
great.
Xena might have given me my first. That might have been my sexual awakening. Her and Gabrielle, her little traveling companion, always, they never talked about it, but
She had that. It wasn't a boomerang. It was the
it's
circle.
the circle.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what she called it, but I always remember when she would flip it and she'd be like, and doing her battle cry and everything.
That was the one that was.
If I
late at
heard that,
night, too.
that might make my dick move.
Yeah. And that's just a
She's still
nostalgia
hot.
move.
Have you seen Lucy Lawless? She
Yeah.
must have been like in her 20s doing that show because she's still hot.
Her and Carter, the original Wonder Woman.
Oh, Linda Carter.
Linda Carter.
God, yes.
Smoke. She's hot.
If she's had any work done, she's planned it beautifully and been to
Yes.
the right people.
I'd like to shake her plastic surgeon's
Yes.
hand.
But it was like, I would watch that, and I would even watch, like, remember Wings?
Wings was great. Wings was.
USA Network had in that time, during the summer, USA Network had almost a better, I think it might have had the prime lineup because it had, I'm going to say this one last because this is going into mine. Wings, the single guy, had Xena and Hercules, I think.
Yep.
And then it had my choice, which was American Gladiators. I tossed around a lot of other shows that I really liked, but American Gladiators, and when did the new one come out? That was like in 2000s.
With
like, try to
Hogan.
remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just, before you get into this, I'm just going to concede. Because American Gladiators was far better than Power Rangers. That shit, Laser, Blazer. Oh my
It depends
God,
on
dude.
what age range you are, I think, doing this. But like I watched both.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, let's just go back and forth on events. So you had it wasn't a common man that competed.
No.
They always got someone who had played some college sports or maybe kept in
Steroids were
shape.
huge back then
Yes.
for them.
But the guys that were the normal people competing, I almost wish it would have been someone actually kind of normal. Like you had a guy with some extra pounds on him that does a desk job, but you had some guys with some athletic. The show probably wouldn't have been entertaining at that point, though.
No, it was like D2 and D3 athletes that were still.
A normal man would have just been railroaded within and knocked out, injured in the first two events.
They wouldn't have gotten up the treadmill hill.
That's true.
It wouldn't have happened.
That's the last event. They wouldn't have even gotten past.
No, not even close.
So you had the lineup of Nitro, Laser, Titan, Gemini. Gemini, man, the elder black statesman. He was like the dad of the group.
He was the one that always got to run the gun when they would do the
Assault.
obstacle course. Yeah,
Assault.
Yes.
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 Yep. And then you had the chicks that were like, they were just hot.
They remind me of the wife in Napoleon Dynamite. The one that Rico.
Starla?
The one that Rico tries
Starla.
to. Yes. Yes, that's right. Starla. And the weird guy from the Drew Carey show was her husband. Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude. All that was so great. And thinking back, we've talked about it multiple times where if this thing ever blows up and we buy a studio, we're buying a studio that's far bigger. And I would love nothing more than to set up that attack court where you have the tennis ball gun.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, the tennis ball gun is a dream of mine that I've had for so long.
That was by far my favorite event.
Yes.
It was the coolest thing because you'd never seen. You're like, that fucking exists. And then you would be like, the guy had access. So like from the longest range, wasn't it like, I'm trying to remember. So
You had a shoulder blaster, like a
shoulder rocket launcher.
Yep.
You had one that was like, I think almost like a cannon that you would aim behind a thing of glass, kind of almost like they had, except a rocket in one shot. Then as you got closer, you had a slingshot.
You had the smaller, like almost handgun.
When you got a little bit closer, and it was the target above the gladiator.
Yeah.
And then once, if you did make it past him, by the time you got up to the very base of where he was at, it gave you the 3 balls. And you would just see guys ducking behind it, just trying to chuck them up at the target.
And you think about the big metal balls that they used to cruise around in, where they would have to stop in the smoking targets.
Oh, that one was Atlas ball.
Yes. What was the one where they used to have to run around and dunk the balls in the like trash can looking things that used to roll up and down?
Oh, that one was, there was 3 of them, right? And both guys got to compete at the same time. And was there 1 or 2 gladiators? There was 2 gladiators, 3 of those little areas.
And they would try to tackle you and bring you down before you put it in. So you would do that they would do the last second shot right before they were getting tackled.
Or you would see like almost the defensive end move of like the stretch and the reach around to try to drop it in there.
And then it always it wasn't the last one that they did, the climb up the mountain. It was the last one they did, I think.
No,
right?
so the last one was the Eliminator.
Okay, so that was the Eliminator, where it was a bunch of different stuff, and it was the maze to crawl
That was,
over.
you had to go up the treadmill. Then it had the little
the hand bike.
The hand bike to go across. Then the spinning log that you had to go across. Then the net up. Then a zip line down. After the zip line,
you had to crawl over the walls.
You had to crawl over the walls, and then you had to choose the 3 doors.
Yeah,
and behind 2 of the doors,
there were gladiators.
There were gladiators
ready to take you down. Mm-hmm. I remember them climbing up the wall, and they got like a 10-second head start, and then you'd see the gladiators start to climb up the wall so much faster, and they had to hit the buzzer at the top.
Like all they had to do was, you would see the guys that you knew were going to win, or the girls that you knew that they were going to win, would run and already be up like 5 feet. They would run up and get a high grip and start going. And then you would, as soon as you would see someone go and try to just stand on the ground and reach up and get their footing, you're like, that guy's fucking toast.
Yep.
Because all the gladiator did was they knew where the footholds were. You would see most of them 80% of the time, unless they were too far to jump, they would run up, jump off the wall, and just grab an ankle and rip you off the wall.
And there was like, I want to say there was 3 competitors, and there was like 2 gladiators, so you would always know.
It was always 2 competitors, 2 women and 2 men.
I thought was there only 1 gladiator then? Because it seemed like they would always go after the weaker one first,
Nope,
and then they go
it
after
was
the
1
other.
gladiator assigned to each person, but they would all go, I think, at the same time.
Dude, that was so good. The 90s was so good for that kind of shit.
You would have the one where you had to do the monkey ring swings across and like time it, and they would get their legs around you and then just crank on you.
As soon as you got in that leg grip, you were just done.
Yes. And then the one, so they did have the pugil stick one where they both stood on the platform.
Still want to do that to this day. I would pay money to go pugil stick. Like you and I up there, we could do that shit all fucking day. And the kids and the wives and everything would just stick behind and probably get bored watching us go up there and climb that shit every single time.
The other 3 that I can remember, God, I'm just reminding myself what a great show this was. The one where you got to swing off, and it was the gladiator on the pedestal, and you were like the human wrecking ball.
And you had to knock them off?
And sometimes the gladiators got fucking launched. And then there was the one where it was 2 gladiators and 2 guys, and they were all up on stages surrounding. Remember, there was the little thing that hung from the ceiling that had the balls on it,
and they could bounce down and then bounce
on the
up
bungee.
to get the balls.
It was like and you had the higher balls were worth more, and the gladiators were trying to swat the balls out of their hands.
How is that not still a thing? Like I'm so excited just talking about it. I would watch that shit over and over and over.
And then
again.
Skytrack. Do you remember Skytrack? It was where they were hung upside down.
The monkey bars?
No, they were hung upside down on like a remember those old car racing tracks where you just pull the trigger and the cars would just zip around?
Yeah.
Put that upside down. So you're hanging from the ceiling, but your cord is on a pulley, and you would run along the track bear crawl style, upside down.
I'm kind of remembering.
And then the gladiators would try to they would start out just right behind you and try to and you have to do turns and everything like that. God damn, great show.
We get Ninja Warrior where there's none of the fun part. Like it's cool to see those guys jump across stuff.
I need someone in front of that guy trying to drown his ass.
You need a foil every single time. You need somebody trying to get.
I need
into
a
the water.
foil with long ass silky blonde hair,
mullets aplenty,
roided the fuck out in a singlet, trying to wrestle these guys down.
Yeah, that's if we were keeping score here, you just won with that pick. It was incredible.
I'm not going to celebrate on that. I'm going to ask before you go into your or before we go into worth themes. Actually, we're going to do honorable mention for TV show after bathroom break. If that's cool.
Okay.
All right, back in with our final category, which is best '90s TV theme.
This
Theme song. Yeah, not the.
This brought me so much back, or so back into the 90s again. And I'm not even going to tip picks because there's so much. But the theme song for me, it is me, right? Is it you or is it me?
It depends. Like if you went first last time, I can go first this time.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Mine is, I'm not sure how relevant this is actually going to be and jog people's memory. I watched this show kind of peripherally because my mom really liked it. But there was always something about the theme that, like, regardless of what I was doing, it just, like, fucking caught my attention and I would just kind of peek over. Do you remember the show Highlander?
Yeah.
Do you remember the fucking theme song by Queen?
Was it Queen?
It was Queen. They did the theme song for the movie. So if anyone's not familiar, the movie Highlander, it's kind of like a weird, like, kind of cult classic movie. It's not, like, super well done, but basically this guy is, like, a Scottish... the Highlander. He's from the Highlands. He's called the Highlander. He's this guy in Scotland, and he's part of like a Scottish clan. He ends up getting killed by this warrior guy, but then comes back to life and discovers that he's immortal. And then he runs into Sean Connery playing a Spanish guy. Who teaches him, who's also immortal, who teaches him that there's actually like a race of immortals or something throughout the world. The guy that originally killed him also is immortal, but didn't know that the main guy was immortal. And the whole point is the immortals try to cut each other's heads off. And so after this movie, USA Network, another fucking shout out for USA Network.
Bango, bango.
Did a Highlander show, and they got to keep the theme for TV show sung by Queen. And it was called... I'm not going to play it, obviously, for copyright reasons, but I want to say Princes of the Universe. If you've never heard it, do yourself a favor and go and listen to it because it's fucking excellent and it will fire you up. The theme song was probably actually ended up being better than the show, but God damn
Even
it.
the show was good, though, because there was always something crazy that was going on. It was... not to the level of like a Star Trek special effects look with people, but they were always running into bards or different like types of people, it seemed like, in camps that always looked different. There was always something kind of special about them.
It was always because like the whole point of the series was that like the main guy was a cousin of the guy in the movie and was also immortal, and it was almost like a serialized, like, who's the immortal that's going to try to kill him this week? Yeah. And then at the end of it, it would end in a sword fight, and he used a fucking katana with, like, a white handle with, like, a dragon on it or something like that.
Didn't make any sort of sense with being a Highlander.
I know. And at the end of it, they would sword fight, and he would end up cutting off the guy's head because in the immortal world, that's how you absorb their power. You get what's called the quickening, and this was where the special effects came in. It was basically like... it almost looked like electricity was flowing around the building and wind would whip around and then the electricity would like shock him and flow into him and be like, oh, and he'd absorb the power. I've gone back and watched that show a little bit and I'm like, yeah, I could probably get into this if I took the time, but God, that theme song and just Queen just fucking grabs you by the nuts as soon as it jumps. And it's not even a slow build up for the song. It just like puts you right into it.
Yeah, that's it. I almost feel like Highlander was better than wasn't better than Xena, but it was absolutely better than why am I drawing a blank? Kevin Sorbo.
Oh, Hercules.
It better than Hercules, not as good as Xena.
Yeah.
Like it just kind of fit that mold where they were sort of similar in a way, but just enough.
USA had a niche and it knew what it was doing with it.
Yep. And then you get into there was a Silk Stockings was also another weird like USA show. It would always come on after wrestling, and it was like a thriller, kind of mild porny.
It was like an erotic thriller.
Yeah, but USA had a niche. It felt like where it was a little bit more above the threshold of what some of the other networks would show. And it kind of played out in Highlander too, where you would see a little bit more action than you would see.
Oh, there was
like
some lovemaking in Highlander. It was very ahead of its time.
Fantastic. I'm just gonna go with what I've seen for just theme songs. It was Family Matters for me. Like Family Matters, just the whole family dynamic that would be introduced in the theme song to it. You hear all the words going through. There was a little bit of the theme song was close to not Family Matters. It was close to oh God,
Was it one of the shows on like around the same time?
yeah,
Not like a Full House or anything.
yeah.
Right?
It was kind of a Full House, like just the singing of it and the pan shots that they would take like into the park.
It was a song that pertained, and I can almost remember every single word. What was it? It's a grand tradition, or no? It's
this
of a
day
grand
and age,
design. Some people say
reading
it's
it good
even
news.
harder to find. Well, then there must be some magic clue inside these gentle walls.
It was just so good, man.
Those theme songs, though, like that and Full House and Step by Step.
Yeah,
Family members, Step by Step said
day
in
by
the
day.
song, so it was the title. But like even like Full House and Family Matters, it was like a song about the show without saying it was about the show. Like the characters are being too on the nose. You were just like,
Absolutely.
it's about this family dealing with stuff, and like it's a new age. And God, that was such a good fucking show. That was on my list of 90 shows, just because.
Since we've talked about this topic, I've gone through and watched at least a season plus of Family Matters, just because it transports you back to being a kid so much, and seeing Carl as the policeman and all the kids. And like you were talking about, the setup of the singing, and it would pan to the different characters, and you'd see that
They all turned and looked at the camera and like smiled. They were all doing something. Then they turned and smiled at the camera.
Yeah, the studious daughters would be studying, and the doofy older brother that was the jock.
The
would be
younger
doing
kid that they
something.
ended up getting rid of at some point or something because they couldn't get because grandma became too popular and needed more screen time. But God, Carl was a fucking saint, man.
He was.
He was a
He put up
Chicago
a lot of
Chicago
shit.
cop. He not only had his family, which was his wife Harriet.
Yep.
Okay,
And Harriet worked in the Chicago Tribune downtown.
did she?
Yeah. She was an elevator. She ran an
working-class
elevator
family.
before she ran the security.
Gotcha. Okay, and then you had the son and the daughter, and then you had
Two daughters.
I know, but they got rid of the youngest one, and then then Harriet's mom lived with them.
No, it was Carl's mom.
Oh, it was Carl's
Yep.
mom? Okay. The way
'Cause
she
he
talked
was-
to him was very mother-in-law, but I guess it also can apply. And then didn't like Harriet's sister, because it wasn't Carl's sister, it was
Harriet's sister
and her
that lived.
kid
Yep.
moved in. God damn, Carl.
And you have Eddie, the oldest.
That's right.
Estelle was the grandma. Waldo was Eddie's just goofy ass friend. You had Laura. And
Laura,
then-
that's right. Okay. And on top of that, you got the horny, nerdy next door neighbor coming over constantly trying to bang your daughter.
Steve Urkel, and that I think it was a Fiat that he used to drive that had the door that opened in the front.
The steering
and
wheel
then-
column and
Yep,
everything
the
moved with it and
three-wheeler.
everything. Yep.
Shit was just so great. And over time, just the way that it morphed into like just random family troubles. And I loved it. I never really thought of it back then. But again, like Power Rangers with the kind of token friend, it was to see another culture's family being built in just the same way with the same goofy struggles.
You know when when you get shows that how they call it like jumping the shark, because like Happy Days, that's where they say Happy Days completely blew it was when Fonzie jumped the shark. Have you ever heard that expression?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Family Matters got ridiculous and could have jumped the shark, but I never saw it like that. Because at the point when Steve created that chamber and that chemical,
To
that
be
he to become Stefan or Kel.
Yeah, Stefan. Yep.
Yes. And then all of a sudden he was just charming and smooth as fuck and good looking. And Laura was just like, oh my God.
When Jaleel White became Jaleel White instead
Yes.
of Urkel.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that was something about him? He's like, guys, you got to throw me a bone and let me just act normal in a portion of this show. They're like, season 5.
Yeah.
If we make it 5 seasons, we'll talk.
We'll bring you out of your shell eventually.
But just the fact that that became a thing on a family sitcom, that there was a neighbor who could take a potion or go into a machine that would turn him into this just like stud. But at no point you were like, oh, nope, that's Steve Urkel. He's just really smart.
Yep. He just finally, he bloomed. It was kind of like the machine was like him going through puberty at that point. And you saw a lot of it just so much in those family sitcoms back then, where you would have, in Home Improvement, you would have the neighbor across the fence, Wilson. You'd never see his face, but he always played such a critical role in it.
He was the sage.
Yeah.
He was the wise old sage across the cedar fence.
Everybody kind of had it, but Urkel was so much more involved in the family's day to day because he was trying to date the daughter.
I think he became, like, after probably the first season or after the first few episodes, after they saw his reaction, if he wasn't already like a main character, they were like, we got to lean into Steve.
He's our moneymaker here. Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess you got a couple. I mean, the common ones to think about in this situation was Friends was during the 90s. Yeah, no one can hear I'll Be There For You. And I like Friends, but you can't hear I'll Be There For You. And that's weird because that song only became popular because of the show. But now no one can separate that song from the show.
Yeah, and it also transitioned onto the radio. Like, it was an actual song that was played, I feel like, whereas...
God, man, can you imagine? Because that band hadn't, and hasn't had a hit since.
No.
I don't think. The Rembrandts, I think it is.
Is that who it was?
Yeah. And I wonder, though, like, can you imagine how many bands do you think get approached? Because there's so many shows that get pitched. And probably have to have, like, a theme and stuff like that.
Everybody does.
How many bands do you think have, like, submitted themes to get picked up by a show, and all of a sudden this show becomes the biggest thing there's ever been at the time, and all of a sudden your one song has you set for life.
You're synonymous with that for forever.
You're in everybody's house that has a DVD copy of this show, regardless if your CD is there or not.
You see the Hansons with the one-hit wonders and things like that, but these almost live on an infamy just because of the show that it's connected to.
We never got a Hanson TV theme song. That's a shame, right?
Yeah, big shame, right?
All right, man. You got anything else?
I don't. This was great.
Dude, walk down memory lane.
The 90s were probably the best decade to me.
We're going to keep revisiting probably the 90s. It's just fun to fucking reminisce and talk about. So we'll think of some more topics for another one-on-one.
All right.
Usual drill, guys. Socials are after. Please, on these one-on-ones, guys, we want to hear back from you. We're going to be putting out polls also before each one-on-one that's going to pertain to the one-on-one. Throw your votes in and then send us an email and let us know kind of what your choices on it are, and we'll maybe mention it during the next one.
Yeah, we want to hear your good stuff. We want to hear your nostalgic moments, not just ours.
Later.
Peace.
All right, guys. Hey, thank you so much for making it through another episode and sticking with us. If you want to kind of follow up on the next upcoming episodes, get some teasers, Adam, can they get us on the Twitter?
Well, you can get us on the Twitter. Our Twitter handle is Historically High. That's Historically HI.
Nice. And on the Instagram?
Our Instagram is Historically High Pod. That's Historically High POD.
And what happens if you're social media inept?
If you have any issues where you can't figure out social media, our email is historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com.
We set up a landline.
Just in case.
You guys can go ahead and shoot us any question, comments, or even maybe suggestions for future episodes, something you guys want to hear.
Yeah, high thoughts, questions, anything like that. We're always open. We'll always get back to you.
Hell yeah, guys. See you on the next episode.
Peace.